Game over, man. Game over.
Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So simple.
Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for August 12th, 2025. I am Brennan Cassidy, and I am without my usual podcasting partner, Judy Duran. He and I will not be conjoined during this episode, but I am excited to welcome back frequent contributor here at In Session Film. Joining me once again, Shaurya Chawla. Shaurya, I feel like you've been living here on the podcast as of late.
That's been my plan. I'm so glad I'm succeeding.
Yeah, talking about conjoining, right? You're trying to sneak your way under our skin, quite literally sometimes.
It's working. It's working. It's working.
It's great to have you back, man. It's awesome that we can be together once again on a podcast in podcasting form. I look forward to hear what you have to say about this film together. It has been quite the year for horror films thus far. And maybe we could start there. Would you agree with that? Given the slew of horror films that we've gotten, it's been pretty effective, especially when we look at the box office results for movies like Sinners and most recently Weapons. It's been very, very powerful, to say the least.
Yeah, I've actually been really impressed because horror is a genre that, there's so much you can do with it. And just to see some of the projects that have come up like Sinners and Weapons, but, you also look at 28 years later and stuff like that too. It's like there's been some really interesting stuff going on with it. So to see it succeeding, it's great.
Yeah, and you mentioned 28 years later, which I think is another great example because even some of the franchise horror films that we've gotten this year, most specifically 28 Years Later and Final Destination Bloodlines. Final Destination Bloodlines was a huge hit. I didn't love it as much as anyone else did, but at the same time, it was a pretty interesting take on that concept. So it's also interesting to see horror films kind of embrace unique approaches to familiar material if they're not original films such as Weapons or Sinners or Together, as we're about to go and talk about here. So we're definitely in a new era when it comes to horror. Let's see if Together is able to join that conversation. Let's jump right into it. This film is written and directed by Michael Shanks. It is his feature film debut. This is someone who started out as a content creator on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken. And interestingly, he is maybe one of 4 or 5 YouTubers turned directors who will be releasing movies in 2025. We had the movie Bring Her Back earlier this year from the Philippaus. That was, of course, from the duo on YouTube, Raka Raka, as they're called. Chris Stuckman has Shelby Oaks coming out later this year. Dan Trachtenberg, I guess you can also qualify for this conversation. He had, well, it was a podcast, right? He was a content creator of sorts, the Totally Rad Show specifically, and he kind of has 2 movies coming out this year. One of them already did come out that he co-directed, the animated Predator film, Killer of Killers, and of course Predator Badlands coming out later this year. Interestingly, all of these YouTubers turned directors seem to be dabbling in horror, most specifically. Perhaps that's just the playground they want to play in, but it's a very interesting movement that we're seeing here. And maybe Together we'll join that conversation as well. This film stars real-life married couple Dave Franco and Allison Brie. They play Tim and Millie, a romantic couple who find themselves at a crossroads as they move to the country, with tensions already flaring. An encounter with an unnatural force threatens to corrupt their lives, their love, and their flesh. That is the official plot synopsis on IMDb, and they have that there just so you don't forget that this is, in fact, a body horror film. So let's get that out of the way, and let's jump right into this. So, Shaurya, what did you think about Together?
I really enjoyed it. I actually went in completely blind. I didn't even really know about the IMDb plot synopsis for this one. And the reason for that is because recently with horror movies, I've been trying to avoid everything and just watch them, as they play out.
Sometimes the marketing can be too revealing.
Yes, it can. I won't say much, but we were just mentioning the movies by YouTubers. Shelby Oaks. I got to see that at Fantasia last year.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I saw the trailer for that. There's a couple of things in there I wouldn't have shown, but
from what I've heard, as someone who hasn't seen that movie yet, the trailer kind of gives away its its framing device, like its narrative framing device in a way?
I'll keep my mouth shut about that
Oh,
part.
okay, okay.
But
You can neither
the,
confirm nor deny what I'm saying.
yeah, but there is a couple of things which I noticed in the trailer. I was like, that maybe don't show that part. But
That's unfortunate.
yeah, but I think Together did a pretty good job of keeping things quiet, especially when it came to showcasing what really is happening and how it's happening.
Yeah,
And
yeah. The marketing was actually pretty cryptic. Even the trailers I thought were not very revealing at all, which I appreciated.
yeah, and so going into the movie, I was just excited to see it because I think the two actors are great, and yeah, having seen it, I had a great time. Very interactive screening, especially as things get going, and yeah, I was happy with it. We'll talk more.
Yeah, I mostly agree with what you're saying there. I did enjoy myself overall. It mostly has to do with Dave Franco and Allison Brie. I think they're quite terrific in this movie. And of course, it makes sense. They are married in real life, so they do bring some type of natural chemistry to their relationship as depicted on screen, even if that relationship is ripe with problems, as I'm sure we'll talk about further. When the film is scary and when it's funny, it really does come down to their delivery of the material. They are very committed to this story, probably even more so than Michael Shanks himself. I think this movie is kind of a good example of first-time director syndrome in a way. And I mean that in a very specific way, because when you tend to knock films from first-time directors that don't fully work, it's usually for one of two reasons. It's usually because they're overly confident and they just trip over their ambitions, or they're not confident enough. And I kind of think this falls into the latter for me. I think just given the material here, I sometimes feel like Shanks is pulling his punches, at least a little bit more so than I would have liked, just given how vibrant and how colorful some of these situations are. I think there was an opportunity to make this film even grosser and even funnier than it is. And perhaps that is more of a subjective thing. Perhaps it's also there are moments in this movie that I won't give away, but it's sometimes hard not to compare it to something like The Substance from last year, just given some of the iconography, some of the visuals that we get, some of the situational aspects here. And even that film, The Substance, when it wasn't divulging in its body horror stuff, there was a kineticism to that movie that Coralie Forgeat brought to it that always matched the situation itself. And I kind of wish Michael Shanks was able to do something similar. And I don't think he always does. There's a passivity to this one that felt a little safe is the wrong word, but I kind of wish he pushed it a little bit farther and got a little bit more daring with the material. Now, with that said, I think it does have a pretty wild final act. And I was mostly on board with that. But again, it mostly does come down to the commitment of both Allison Brie and Dave Franco, who I feel like the thesis of this conversation we're about to have is they're really good in this movie. I don't know of anyone else that could have played these roles. I think they are that good, that perfectly cast. And they really do save a lot of it for me. That in the end, I still enjoyed it, but it's not going to sit with me like Weapons has, for instance. It's certainly a more diverting film by comparison.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, it's a more entertaining movie, perhaps. I mean, saying that with Weapons, especially with where that goes, I know, but I think there's a couple of more things like this. I do. I wouldn't say safe is the word I would use. Probably contained, I would say. Like
that's
just
a fair
try
word.
to. Yeah, or somewhat like like sort of testing the waters, if you will, because there were a couple of times where even being a first-time director, especially, sometimes you get the wild swing movie where you just you really do get to go all out and do some really crazy stuff, and that's great. But sometimes especially when you're working with two creative people who've been working for as long as they have, with Allison Brie and Dave Franco, it's like you're also thinking about it like, oh, they have more experience than me. Maybe they'll have their own way of, trying to elevate some of this material or something like that. So sometimes there can be an interesting synergy there too, because there are points in this movie where I feel like all the minds are sort of working together, to make some of those sequences happen. And sometimes I think the parts where I feel like it kind of holds itself back at times, where mostly like the first section of the movie where it, like, especially in terms of like
like the
getting things
setup.
together. Yeah. With some of that, because it felt like some things were kept a little brief, and I would have liked a little more exploration for those.
There's a lot of quick cutting for certain sequences. I
Yeah.
think the one sequence leading up to the third act
Mhm.
that I really do think does a great job, not overstaying its welcome, but delivering exactly what I would have liked to see is the bathroom scene. I'll simply say the bathroom scene that takes
Mhm.
place at Millie's school. I thought that was a very effective and also a very funny sequence.
Mhm.
Um, I I'm not gonna. This might be a spoiler. This might be a slight spoiler here, but I'm gonna be very vague about it. The trailers, if you've seen the trailers, do emphasize a particular moment that occurs in the third act between Millie and Tim, involving what is essentially a miniature buzzsaw, right? Uh,
Mhm. Yeah.
eh, the buildup from the trailer, I actually thought was more effective than what we got in the movie. There's a moment in the movie itself when we actually get it where it cuts and then we just see the aftermath of it. And I think this is an example of I kind of wish the movie would have shown us a bit more and be a bit more abrasive with the grotesqueness of that particular sequence. And there are a few moments here where I thought it could have really taken advantage of that, and it doesn't quite do that. But where it does is in some of those smaller dynamics between Allison Brie and Dave Franco, because like I said, they're really good. They're really funny here. This is actually a very funny movie.
Oh yeah.
And I actually think it might be more effective as a horror comedy than as a horror movie, just pure and simple. I actually think it's more effective in those comedic touches.
Yeah, and which is also playing to the strengths of these two actors because they've done so
Yeah.
much comedy over the years. So
Yeah.
to just have them be in this setting and really whenever, like, there are some moments that you could say play more perhaps seriously if you look at them
Mm-hmm.
on a page, and
Sure.
but to add the sort of darker humor to it in a couple of moments like that, or just sort of looking to the fact that this is a little surreal when you play it a different way.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, they do a great job of that, and between being an actual couple in real life and being comedic actors as well, that's something that played through.
They clearly seem to like making this movie, especially if you've
Oh, yeah.
watched some of their interviews promoting this. Just the way they talk about horror movies specifically, they have a real passion for the genre, and that's really exciting to see and listen to them. And they really do seem like they're having a great time here. Because this, I do feel like genuinely, and why I did ultimately come out positive on the movie, even if I'm maybe a little bit more reserved than you on certain things, it really is meant to be a diverting film. It's not necessarily meant to be a movie that's making you think in a way. I mean, there are some clear themes, some clear allegories here, but it's not like, let's say, something like Weapons, which we just saw this past weekend, which is a movie that's shrouded in ambiguity. It's a movie with a lot on its mind. And it's a movie that can actually reveal itself more with time as you think about it and as you marinate with it. I wouldn't say Together is that kind of movie. It's not going for that kind of movie. The metaphor at play, especially when the Jamie character played by Damon Harriman comes into the fold, the metaphor he gives about Plato and Zeus, which I'll just say vaguely without getting into too many spoilers here, it's a very obvious metaphor for what this movie is regarding codependency with relationships and what it means to be dependent on your other half. And when that becomes a healthy version of that dependency and when it's not. And in this situation, Millie and Tim, what tensions are arising from them is mostly due to Tim as a struggling musician. And moving out to the countryside, he is losing out on some of these opportunities to keep that livelihood going and that passion going, and that leads to resentment between the two of them. That's a very relatable notion. The movie's not subtle about any of that, and it's not trying to be. It's not trying to make you uncover new things and new images, new interpretations about what this means. That is exactly what this means. So it's really meant to be more of a diverting experience. So I do acknowledge that, and in that way, while I was in the theater, I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed it for the most part.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, there's an entire scene which takes place with Jamie where Millie pretty much just spells out the entire thing to you if you didn't
That's
get it up
true.
to,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like up until now.
Here's this movie on a silver platter. That's exactly
Yeah.
that kind of moment.
Yeah, it's like if you didn't get it until now, what we were doing, here you go. This is our plot. This is our message. And I think, in that way, it's very direct. But I don't feel like it. I mean, that's also something that comes up with when you're making something for the first time, where you're like wanting to get the information across. Sometimes a little directly. I feel like I'm really railing on him as a first time director. I'm not. I think let me be very clear to clarify. I think he did a good job overall. But since we were talking about debut works, but yeah, I think the just looking at the different themes and seeing how that played into some of the horror moments, as to especially the initiation of some of the horror moments, as to
yeah. Some of the setup is pretty clever. I will say that too.
Yeah, like, but factoring in how a certain moment in their relationship would have this reaction to it, or
there's some foreshadowing happening there.
Like this moment of connection, if you will.
No, that's a great point. That's a really good observation. And there are little things in the movie that you might pick up on, especially regarding their dynamic, maybe certain things that the two of them say to each other, or how some of these situations arise and how that might tie back to a certain thing that maybe occurred between them before this flesh-related encounter takes over their lives. There are some interesting callbacks that add a bit of an artfulness to this movie that do give it some additional qualities than just merely being a diverting experience, even though I do think it is mostly functioning as a diverting experience. And, to your point, at least you were kind of alluding to this, I think. Sometimes that might be the best way for a first-time director to go, as opposed to really tripping over their ambitions and just trying to do way too much, way too soon. It's kind of a double-edged sword for me, because on one hand, I'm someone that prefers when filmmakers take wild swings. I prefer that. That's just more of a me thing. And I would actually rather see directors take wild swings and fail, as opposed to not take wild swings and then coast through. And I wouldn't necessarily say this is coasting, but it might mean that when Michael Shanks makes another film after this, it's probably going to be a lot better, because this is perhaps his first way of honing in on where his skills are and how he can tighten the right things up, so that way he knows where and when to take certain swings. And perhaps this is a great setup to something greater. And I'll be excited to see that. I am looking forward to seeing what Michael Shanks has up his sleeve for his next film, whether it be in the horror genre or something totally different. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I think if he does something more in horror, that'd be really interesting, because some of the horror moments, like there's this one scene that you see a brief part of it in the trailer as well, where they're across like a hallway, they're across like two doors apart, and they're sort of seem to be coming closer. That entire sequence, there's a couple of, the chuckle-worthy moments in there, but otherwise it's a very tense moment as they're trying to stop, a thing from happening, a connection from happening.
And I'll simply say this, the contortionistic moments, probably the most visceral part of the movie, more so than any of the actual body horror that we get. The body horror itself, I think, is mostly effective. You could kind of tell that there is maybe a little bit of a limited budget supporting it. I don't think it doesn't quite have the same practicality as something like The Substance, for instance, but when they're drawn to each other quite physically, as you alluded to, the contortionistic aspect of it, those were probably the most visceral moments of the film for me. Like, those are the moments I felt, oh, this is rough. I don't know if I could take, and that's a good thing. That's how I want to react to a movie like this.
No, yeah, especially because you have such a force of attraction that's bringing them together. You're expecting there to be this maligned movement to so much of what's going on, and the way they captured that in the movie was great. I mean, speaking to just kind of alluded to that bathroom scene as well. Like, there's a few moments when that's playing out where it's like, that's painful. that it's like
some good sound work, to make that you really come through.
Yeah, like you get like it does manage to make that happen, but it is a standout moment I feel like that's the first moment of the movie where you really go, oh, okay, now it's gonna start picking up from here too.
Yeah, that's the it's this kind of movie moment.
Yeah. Like,
but like I mentioned earlier, it's also a very funny moment. That's probably the moment of the film where I think everything that this movie is going for tonally really collides into something that feels kind of effortless, and that's all of these pieces, whether it be Franco and Bree, and then director Michael Shanks. That's where everything does come together, and the way that scene resolves itself is also really funny. The Jamie character, once again played by Damon Harriman, who's an actor I do quite like, and I think he's effective here. The writing of the Jamie character, it must not be trying to be tricky with that. It is so obvious the second you meet him where this movie is going. I'll simply say that.
No, yeah, that kind of called that one. That was something that I think I said to my friend also when we walked out of the movie. It was like, if there was one thing I could say, it's like you kind of saw where that was gonna go, and it went pretty much exactly where you expected it to go. And I mean, I'm still tiptoeing around things over here, but when you eventually do start to learn about certain things, I will say though that as much as I kind of saw where some things were going, I would have liked some more into that stuff. Like
because there's a lot of lore that we don't really get explained to us, which I'm all for, but some of that lore was just as interesting as what was going on in the movie itself. That selfishly, I would not have minded hearing a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and there was a lot too. Like they like some of the things that you sort of see and that you hear about. It's like, okay, I would like to know some more about how we went from whatever the idea was to why was this the specific thing that was sort of devised.
For those listening, you could tell we are really trying not to give this away. So on that note, I'm going to ask you one last question, and this might be another difficult one to answer, just given how much we don't want to reveal here. What did you think of the final shot?
I laughed. I'm not gonna lie. I thought that was I thought it was a funny shot to end on.
Yeah, I'm of two minds with it. I'm of two minds. I'll simply say yes. I kind of chuckled at it as well. So I guess that means Michael Shanks got what he wanted out of it. It delivered its intended result. The other side of me wishes there was maybe a little bit more ambiguity. I'll simply say that. I'll explain it this way so I can, still keep the context kind of vague. But it involves two characters approaching a door, and then the camera turns to that door, but there's a slight tinted window on that door. I kind of wish the movie would have ended and cut when you could see just a little silhouette between where that window could have been, but you don't get the full reveal of what's actually behind it. Yeah. I think that would have been more clever for me. Like, that's just something I respond to. It probably would have been less humorous, to your point. So it's kind of a twofold thing for me. It's like it is a moment that I guess wish was a little bit more trusting of its own material simultaneously.
Yeah, so I actually thought they weren't going to do it. So I thought it was going to end the way that
so I guess that makes it more surprising.
Which is why I think I laughed a little bit more, because when
they actually went there. Okay.
Yeah, when that bit was going on, I said, and cut. Oh, wait, pan. So
we're actually seeing it. We're actually going to see it. Actually, that's a great point, because my expectation was that it was simply going to linger on these two individuals who are arriving at this house, and it was going to linger on maybe their reaction shot, and that was it, which would have been pretty clever. Like, that would have been a funny way to end it as well. But to your point, the way that the camera moves and everything, it's almost like it's trying to trick you into thinking, or it's tricking you into preparing yourself for it to end that way, only for it to not. So okay, so there is a little trickery there that I guess I can respect. That's a fair observation.
Yeah, and but yeah, I got a chuckle out of it. I guess that was again the intended effect that they were going for.
I
So
guess so. I guess
yeah,
so.
yeah.
But yeah, overall, a pretty fun movie, a diverting one as well. Do you have any final thoughts on Together before we wrap up this conversation?
Yeah, no, I just think it's a mostly pretty fun movie, pretty enjoyable horror flick, and yeah, I don't think it's I mean, it's not probably not my favorite horror movie of the year, but I do think it's a fairly enjoyable watch, and I think they set out to do some things like very specifically when it came to exploring relationships, codependency in a darkly comic way, perhaps in a horror way, perhaps, and I think they mostly nailed it, mostly because I think these two were excellent, Alison Brie and Dave Franco.
Yeah, it is one of those things where I feel like if this movie were cast any differently and those performances didn't work, the movie kind of falls apart. It's one of those cases where these actors are kind of breaking their backs carrying this thing. Even though I do think Michael Shanks is still doing some pretty good stuff behind the scenes. I'm still curious to see what he does after this movie. What is your favorite horror movie of the year so far?
It's Sinners, actually. It still
That's
is.
a good choice. That's a good choice. Yeah.
That's actually still my number one movie of the year. Like it's up there.
It's I guess that means horror is on an uptick for 2025 because your favorite movie of the year is a horror movie. My favorite movie of the year is also a horror movie, and that is 28 Years Later.
That's my number two movie.
Wow. So you heard it here, folks. Here at the In Session Film Podcast, horror wins 2025. Absolutely. Together, still a very good one, or mostly a good one, but not quite as good as some of these other ones that I'm sure we've highlighted quite heavily on the podcast thus far. And for those of you listening, if you agree or disagree with what we just had to say about Together, you can leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube or listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also get a hold of us on social media, whether it be on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. We're active on all those platforms. Or you can email us your thoughts in long form at insessionfilm@gmail.com. Shaurya, thanks for making the time to join me once again for what I think is now the fourth time on the podcast this year.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
How about that?
I feel like I've been asking you to plug your great work so many times as of late, but just in case we have any first-time listeners right now, tell us all about your great work and where we can find you online.
You can find me on YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, you can find me over there as well at Shaurya Chawla. That's the name of my channel as well. I talk about movies, shows, games. In fact, some really fun stuff going on right now. So come over there, and I'll be at TIFF later in the year. So I will be covering that festival as well. And you will find me on Twitter, Instagram with the same name. I guess Facebook, if you still use Facebook.
Yeah. I think a lot of people still use Facebook, but maybe not for the right reasons. Yeah. And of course, you've also contributed some great work over at InSessionFilm.com, great written work as well. Really love having you on the team. Cannot wait for more opportunities to talk to you in podcast form. I'm sure we'll get some more opportunities in the near future. A few quick plugs before we adjourn. On episode 649, which is available now, JD and I used the movie Together as inspiration to talk about our top 5 horror power couples, which was a lot of fun. Actually, a lot of options for us to choose from, which was really exciting. We also have a very lengthy review of Zach Cregger's latest film, Weapons, which I highly recommend you check out, especially if you're looking for something other than the annoying discourse surrounding that movie. We try to be open and have different viewpoints that look at both ends of the spectrum because there is such a thing as nuance when it comes to film criticism that we try to acknowledge. We will also have a new Women in Session coming out this week, so be on the lookout for that. Lots of great new written content on the way over at the website at InSessionFilm.com. A stacked week as always here at In Session Film. You don't want to miss it. Thanks again, Shaurya, for joining me today, and thanks to all of you who tune in on a regular basis. We will see you all next time on the In Session Film Podcast.